You don't have to become a developer to talk to a developer. That's what I'm trying to say. Everyone will ask a single question: how does it help the customer? We'll literally say yes, yes, yes. We will develop everything, whatever you say. It doesn't work like that. It's very important for UX designers to actually build an experience within those tech constraints. Not talking about whether you can go and develop, whether you can go and do all that thing. No. How much can you understand them and how much can you make them understand what you want? But that becomes one of the very, very important reasons why a company hires a fresher. Is the skill to learn for doing this dev handoff activity. That's it. What happens, let us say, when you are working on your designs in a real company? How is it that, obviously someone has to go and build them, right? So once you, your team, your stakeholders, the product manager, the business, everyone comes to a conclusion that, yeah, this is one good stage at which this project can be taken forward, right? So what happens, the next obvious thing which happens over there is, how do you go and communicate with the developers so that they can build this experience? Now, the next team is UX design team, the product design or the UX design team, right? Out of which multiple branches exist over there as well. So these are all the stakeholders which exist when it comes to UX design. So the reason I spoke about all these stakeholders is there is a way in which you can actually collaborate, and there is a way in which the time at which you are working on your projects, it all depends on how you collaborate with these stakeholders. So most in the initial stages, you talk with all those people who are planning the vision, the senior leadership team and all these people. And later you talk more, you associate more with product managers, category managers, or marketing people and all these people. And once the decision is taken that all the stakeholders are aligned that, hey, you know what, this is something which we can go and build and then experiment with, that is when you will have to go and communicate with the tech team, the developers. Here what happens is, mostly there is something called as, again, these are only practices which are followed. There are different ways different companies do these things. I'm only giving you an idea of how generally it happens. Specific cases might vary. Okay, so what happens is, there is something called as a design brief, or some people call it as dev analysis or dev requirement session or whatever. So what happens is, in that session, the product manager and the UX designer together present all the requirements from the UX side for a product to be built in a meeting. Okay, they explain the whole product, they show all the mocks, they show all the proof in terms of what has come from the customers and all these things, and establish the whole value of why they are trying to do the initiative, and they present it to the tech team to say that, hey, you know what, we want to actually go and develop this, we want you to go and build this. So what these people do is, they actually, after attending this meeting, they take all the inputs, they take this document, this whole design documentation, the product and design documentation together, they take all this thing together, they sit and put estimates on how much time does it take for the whole work to be implemented. Okay, this really happens. They give estimates in terms of weeks, sometimes months and all these things. They prepare multiple types of charts and all that to give you estimates in terms of how much time does it take and how many members does it take and all these things to go and develop that. After that, there are a lot of discussion, obviously, because the number of resources, the number of weeks and all these things is all a game of how much money you want to put in building that, right? So all the discussions they have with business and all, once, let us say, that is closed, they agreed that this is what we can build, this is what we cannot build. Which is, again, one important point to note is, it's not just that you and product team decides that we want to build this amazing feature, you have done all the research and everything, doesn't mean that the tech team will literally say yes, 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 we will develop everything whatever you say. It doesn't work like that. All of you have to understand this point. The tech team always brings in perspectives from whether something is practical, whether something is implementable, something takes too much time to, obviously there is nothing like this cannot be done. It never exists, frankly speaking. Anything can be done, anything can be developed, right? But the time it takes, or how practical it is, how quickly can it be done in a cost efficient manner, all these things really matter when they do their analysis about whether whatever UX which you have present, whatever product which you have presented, whether it can be developed or not, right? They come back with all those things, which is popularly known as tech constraints, right? The constraints which tech team brings, so for which you will have to make changes, you have to build it in such a way that it goes within those constraints, actually known as tech constraints, right? It's very important for UX designers to actually build an experience within those tech constraints, because As UX designer, you might have built the best UX the world could have ever imagined, right? But if your tech cannot develop it, if if you're not making it within the constraints your tech team is trying to provide you, it doesn't become a good experience. Your job is not done. So that's very, very important, right? So there's a lot of things which happen in terms of negotiating with what is practical, what is not practical between the tech team and the UX team, right? So after all this happens, then what happens is, once all these agreements are done, that you're like, hey, you know what, this is what we're finally deciding to build, right? That is when comes the UX designer giving all the things which are necessary for the developers to go and actually build it. Okay, this is popularly known as the dev handoff, right? Which means you are handing off all the requirements in very, very, very minute details to the tech with respect to all the things which are happening with the product, which popularly has two parts to it: the backend team and the front end team. You would have popularly heard these things, right? The backend team, to loosely understand what backend team does, is all those things which they do, write code for the logic behind how the product should work, right? The algorithm behind how the product should work is all done by all the data which it stores, all the things which you see, which you do not really see. Let's say you're doing some search, then all the thing which is happening in the background to get you some of those results in the search result. When you're trying to apply a filter, all the logic and all those things which are happening to apply that filter and show you the relevant products, all these things are done by backend developers. So that is one part of it, and the other part is front-end developers. All the things which you popularly see is what they say, but it's not just limited to seeing. All the things which a person interacts with, right? All the things which are all the elements which are there, which a user interacts with, right? Things which you see, hear, tap, touch, whatever, all these things which have to be implemented, all the skeleton part of it is dealt by the front-end developers. So popularly, a misconception is there that UX designers, you only interact with the front-end developers, because generally people's understanding of UX design itself is that they'll solve for some visuals, make some nice, good-looking mocks, and they'll deliver. That's the popular misunderstanding which people have, right? But it's not true. If you are trained well, obviously you'll do much more than trying to go and build some screen and convincing your developer to go and get the right component for them to go and build that screen. It's not just that. You will definitely also work about what is the right kind of architecture. If a filter has to work, now let us say there is a dependent filter, you will have to sit and discuss about the logic in terms of how the dependent filter should work so that it works really well with the customers, bringing in the data from your usability studies, right? I've done tons of projects like this. The simple filters which you see, right? It's actually, filters are one of the most complicated UX, for developers also, it's one of the most complicated things to build, actually, filters. Search results come and then you click on filter and you see apply a lot of filters, right? Easy, tap, 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 you apply all those filters and get the relevant results. It's one of the most difficult things to actually solve for both for UX teams and for developer teams, right? So now how do you will have to sit with them, you have to write all those logics in terms of, when let's say I'm selecting this filter, this is what has to be seen and all these things. You need to give all these logics to the backend developer. So I'll come into a little bit details about it. And then what happens is the developer team decides on how to technically make it possible. You don't have to worry about whether you will bring info from this database, that database, and all. You don't have to worry about all that architecture. Tech architecture, they'll take care of it. But the information architecture for what you're trying to solve, or the interaction architecture, is something which you will have to give, right? So popularly, this is a misconception that you work only with the front-end developers, but it is not. You have to work with both back-end developers and front-end developers. In bigger companies, what happens is there are also people who actually do the work of being the mediator between the UX designer and the developers. They'll take care of which developer to talk to for what. But these people are the ones whom you will talk to, irrespective of whether it's front end, back end, and all these things. You don't have to worry. You just talk to this person who will talk to you. You discuss all the requirements with them and all these things. They will represent the developers, back end, front end, any team. They'll represent DevOps or all these things, and they'll talk to you. In smaller companies, you literally talk to everyone and anyone to get your stuff implemented. Enough. So there's a whole process which happens, and this whole front end, back end, all these things, going back and forth, and all these things happen, and ultimately they will develop it. You will also keep constantly providing the support. Sometimes they miss this thing, that thing, and all these things. Will continue to keep providing the support. They'll do some demos. You will give some feedback. finally they'll give one demo, it will be released, and after it is released, it's a different story altogether because it's an experiment which is running in the company and all. Better UX can be made from that and all. Okay. Now this is the whole process which happens with the developers. Now, I mean, obviously, in this whole part, dev handoff is one significant, but it's a small thing again. So in all the steps, if you have to remember, if you have to tell, the first thing, as I said, was sitting and making your presentation to the dev in that dev analysis or whatever that meeting companies call it, right? Your design brief or whatever it is called. So what you need to do over there is you need to exactly what you are writing in your case studies, in your mini project, mega project, and all these things, right? That's exactly how you will work and write a documentation about what is that you have done in your project, right? Because all those questions will come in your dev analysis. Tech team, because a company, if the company has decided to be a customer centric company, no matter what, who is the person, whether it's a developer, whether it is an operations manager, whether it is a finance person, also everyone will ask a single question: how does it help the customer or the user? If they've taken the decision, they'll all ask you the question. They'll all want the proof to go and do any investment in their side, right? And we are the people who hold that guard, and therefore we make that presentation in that manner so that we have proof for everything. Anything we are proposing, we have proof that we have done all these things. That is the reason why this is going to work, right? The level at which this is done is very different from what you guys are doing. You guys are doing it at one level, which is a very, very good level compared to a lot of other freshers who are trying to apply. But the way, the kind of format or the process and all these things totally are dependent on the company and all these things. So you don't have to worry about all that right now. Okay. The core is to understand that whatever you're trying to present, those documentation, all these things, these are literally helping you to actually present in that particular meeting. So after that, what I told you is they'll go and do their analysis and present a number of weeks and all these things, and a lot of negotiations happen in terms of tech constraints is what I told you, right? So in this stage, the skills which will really help you is how much do you actually understand them? Not talking about whether you can go and develop, whether you can go and do all that thing. No. How much can you understand them and how much can you make them understand what you are? Which is like the general example I give over here is you came to Bangalore. You're probably, only Hindi, but you came to Bangalore. There is one auto wala. Probably he knows only Kannada. What is that you will do to make sure you understand what he's saying and he understands what you are saying? What will you do? Whatever you will do to learn those basic words, this, that, and all these things, observe, talk multiple times, and slowly you'll come to a stage where Ana, Beku, Beda, whatever. You do whatever it takes to finally communicate with them, right? That's exactly what you need to do to get to this stage. So how does it happen? The only way it can happen is actually by working with developers. There is no way this can happen even before you join a company. Therefore, I don't really focus so much on that. It will happen. You go to the developers, you talk to them, they know that you are a fresher, they know you do not really know about all tech constraints and all. But that becomes one of the very, very important reasons why a company hires a fresher, because they do not know about the constraints and therefore they are very open to think about a lot of ideas which are really visionary in nature. Because everyone else in the company already know the constraints, they know what cannot be built. But freshers are those people who actually push the boundaries and say that, hey, why not we build this? And probably some of those things can actually be built and pushed for. That's the reason why they take freshers. One of the very, very important reasons. Anyway, so they know it, right? And you'll obviously participate in these discussions. For example, our Chandru is there right now. He joined that Figo. Now he's definitely experiencing all these things with the company. Once Kavya is also there, right? Now she's experiencing all those things where she's understanding what is happening with the developers. Oh, I thought all this is possible. Now I'm understanding what is not possible on this things. But that thing is making her learn how to communicate with these people. But very important, don't be confused. You don't have to learn everything in front end, back end, everything. No, that's not what it's supposed to be. You just have to understand them and you have to make them understand you. That's it. Nothing else is required. That will happen. There is no textbook to this. The only way it happens is non-textbook approach. You talk to developers, you keep getting better. You don't have to become a developer to talk to a developer. That's what I'm trying to say. That's it. So therefore, I don't focus on any of the textbook ways to talk to developers about this stage. Then what happens in the next stage? The next stage is where after all these compromises and all these decisions are taken, then comes the handoff stage, I said, right? Where you're literally giving all the minute details of what experience should be built, right? This is where you need to develop the skills of going and presenting all the UI components and their respective interactions and their respective states, components UI components go with this, right? If you're making a building a UI component, it comes with all those states. It comes with all those interaction patterns. It comes with it. That's how you build a UI element. And a combination of all these things together is what you build as a design system. And this design system is what you will build along with the developers. So the developers have their version of the design system in code, and you have your version of design system in your tool like Figma or whatever, right? That's how you build a design system. And most probably you'll not be involved in this activity as a fresher. You will not be building a design system as a fresher. You will be working with an existing design system as a fresher. So what will happen? You will go and interact with them with respect to this design system. What design element have you used? What are the states and all these things which are coming along with that UI element? What all have you used? Is there any new requirement for you to have any other state, any other kind of a thing? You will design all those things and you will talk to the developer through a tool which usually helps you do this. Popular handoff tools. I mean, right now Figma does everything. When Figma was not there, Figma didn't have handoff and all. They used to use something called Zeppelin, InVision, multiple products were there like this to go and hand off your measurements, right? Literally, it's like giving measurements to the tailor for them to go and go and stitch your clothes. What you'll do, all these things, that's what you'll do, right? Today, tools have become very smart. You just make a screen. Figma automatically shows which component has it been picked up from. It shows how much all these dimensions are, which color to put. All these things are automatically done. Okay, it has become very easy now. Previously, we used to spend like days and weeks just to do handoff. And imagine if there is a change, what we used to do, like it's very difficult. But now it's become automatic. You use the components, you use everything, you finish the prototype, directly it's done. The developers, you don't have to even mark anything now. Everything is automatically marked. This using a right system and making sure every part of your design is following the design system which your company has recommended is the skill to learn for doing this dev handoff activity. That's it. Then what do you do about the back-end handoff? Because when you are building the product and all these things, you have decided about all the architecture, right? The information architecture, as popularly it is called as, need not always be a flow diagram. It can be represented in multiple ways depending on the projects, right? If it's a big one, you probably draw a diagram. If it's a small one, you just usually write it down as how it should work, and some things are mostly assumed. If I say, hey, we'll have a filtering experience over here, and then in the next page, within the filtering experience, there'll be a sort. Because of the context the company already has, you don't have to draw a diagram of how it works. They'll automatically understand it. But there can be some examples where you literally have to draw a diagram to represent your thing, represent your flow, right? So those diagrams are also done popularly. They used to use Miro and all this thing, but now Figma has taken that also, right? In FigJam, in Figma itself, you can represent all the flows, clearly show all the interactions, and all that is taken care by Figma, right? So these things are what you will speak with the backend team, or both about the backend stuff, about the information architecture and all these things, and the UI components and elements and usage of design system. All this together, you will talk about to this one person who probably will represent both front end and back end teams. Then the next stage is going and providing them like a support, like anything changes, anything happens, you keep updating, and if something is not practical, they'll tell you, and you keep updating and keep going in that discipline until that product is completely developed. So yeah, these are all the things. So in a summary, I've discussed about the whole stakeholder ecosystem in a company. I've discussed about all the stages of how UX designers interact with developers, right? And then I've discussed about skills required or the practice which you will have to do to interact with developers at different stages, right? So yeah, this summarizes how UX designers work with developers. Yeah, awesome. So yeah, I hope this really helps.